Welcome to Momentum Mode. This episode, Mike and I have a wide-ranging conversation with Howard Tullman, a long-standing senior person in the tech community in the Chicago area. Before that, though, I want to thank our sponsor, Kilpatrick, Townsend & Stockton, law firm that both Mike and I have a lot of experience with, and they're here to help you with a wide-ranging set of business needs. Also, shout out to Improve, which is AI for financial advisors, Mike's company, and Aperion Ventures, my firm, and we're part of the Aperion Podcast Network also. Enjoy. Welcome to Momentum Mode, Corey,
Mike.
And today we're joined by Howard Tullman, investor, entrepreneur, mentor, educator, statesman. I mean, one of the godfathers of Chicago technology and more. Okay, Howard, maybe there's somebody out there that doesn't know you. Give the cliff notes, if you will, of Howard Tullman.
Well, I was a trial lawyer for 10 years. And then I retired to start a company 44 years ago called CCC, which is still around. About 6,000 employees these days. And ever since, I've been involved, as you say, in starting new businesses, basically about a dozen businesses, 3 schools, a couple of incubators, a bunch of different businesses in every area except maybe medical, which my brother deals with.
Right. And one of the areas you ran in Chicago is called 1871, a startup hub incubator, really kind of a hub of the startup community, tech startup community.
Yeah, terrible name,
Yeah, right.
People would say, well, wasn't that the year of the Chicago fire?
Yeah.
Were you trying to burn it down? Name anything after that.
And you'd like something you got there after it was named.
Yeah. But the JB's story about that was always that post the fire, there was this huge rebirth of the city, and there was a great wave of invention. They invented the Ferris wheel, the skyscraper, the Tootsie Roll, very important health food.
Columbian Expedition, it was huge, yeah.
So 1871 was actually the number one tech university affiliated incubator in the world for like 3 years running. And we had the unbelievable benefit of having Rahm as the world's greatest cheerleader.
Yeah. So Rahm Emanuel, who was the mayor at the time, but
and has gone on to do just about everything, including being the ambassador to Japan most recently.
There we go. So where do you spend your time? A lot of investing, advising companies, right?
Yeah. We have a fund that we started about a dozen years ago of just friends, and which is probably the only way to go. And some stay friends.
Yeah, right.
So I'm working out. We have about 25 companies.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with all of those. And it's an interesting sort of tier. So the guys who were small went home. The guys who were big or raised a war chest, are back.
Yep.
And the guys in the middle who were stuck with infrastructure and not a lot of revenue, some went south and some morphed into other kinds of businesses. But, as an example, Spot Hero, went from fabulous to zero because people aren't driving. They're not.
All right. So Spot Hero, a company that help people find parking spots in cities and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
And now it's back. I think this year we'll do 2 billion parking spaces.
Wow.
Some crazy number. Snapsheet, another Chicago business, which did collision estimating, mobile collision.
Yeah.
And again, if people aren't driving, they're not having accidents.
Right.
But that company, what's been so interesting, and this is something that is sort of generic across every industry now. When you deal with the insurance industry for years and years trying to introduce innovation was always tough because they said, we're a people company. We can't fire anybody.
Right.
And they had like a concrete layer, we used to call it, of people that it wasn't clear what they did, but it was clear that they were going to be around until they died.
Yeah.
COVID let these companies lay a lot of those people off.
Okay.
And they attrited them when it was time to come back. Or they just never called them back. And the interesting thing was that let them shrink for the first time in probably 50 years.
Okay.
And change their operations from fixed overhead to variable. And in the insurance business with peaks and valleys and valleys, that's a huge advantage.
Yeah.
So all of our companies virtualized to a significant extent. And now we weren't just the overflow.
Yep.
We were actually a different business solution for them. So in terms of a couple of our different industries.
Yeah. So what are you seeing now with companies in terms of their value? Like, is AI changing? Everyone's worth a ton because they have a ad painted on it, or what are you seeing?
Well, first of all, I'd say that the new up is flat.
Okay.
If we're lucky.
Yeah.
So we don't see anybody bursting through in terms of businesses that have been around for a while.
Yeah.
Up is flat, meaning growth percentage or headcount?
Meaning valuation.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, nobody is getting some crazy new valuations because when you look back, the investment community has suffered through at least 3 years of complete standstill.
Yep.
And if you're in the game of running a fund, you're in the IRR business, which is your return over time.
Trade over time. Yeah.
Okay. And so if you subtract 3 years that they get no credit for because nothing has moved, none of these guys are going to have bragging rights.
Right.
None of them. None of these funds.
Meaning they're all top quartile. They're all top quartile.
And some of them are not even, don't even have the guts to say we're going to raise another fund.
Right.
In the old days, have a few exits, you'd have a few good stories, you'd get right on your next fund. But we had a couple at 1871 that weren't going to re-raise. And so A, the valuations are static. B, it's probably getting to be almost impossible now. AI is the third wave of what I call sort of the platform crushing. Okay. The first wave was if you're super lucky, Microsoft buys you. If you're not lucky, they crush you. That was the first.
Okay, so we're going 90-ish. Yeah, 90.
First wave.
Yeah.
Right? The second wave in the game business and in a number of other businesses, but I was a game developer for years as well. It used to be you'd actually start and you'd build an engine and a game.
Yeah.
Then along comes Xbox and Nintendo and basically PlayStation, and it's over.
Yeah.
You're building on top.
Yeah.
The gatekeeper of the platform has taken 30%.
Right.
That's your life.
Yep.
And now the third wave is these big LLMs, the language models.
Yeah.
No startup is going to build from zero.
Yeah.
It's all, Amazon, Facebook, 3 or 4 other companies, Microsoft, Google, have the resources and the ability to avoid balance sheet punishment by committing billions of dollars to this.
Yep.
Everybody who's going to build a successful business, if they're lucky, is going to build a business vertical to a market.
Yep.
Above one of these or on top of one of these, pay 30%, just like you pay the App Store or Apple. And then they're going to have 15 people trying to do the same thing. And the differentiation is going to be their specific expertise in as narrow a vertical as they can make a living in.
Sure.
But one that has enough volume to support a real business. So, but having said all of that, we have no clue as to how you make AI useful in most businesses.
Okay.
In our day, we called it machine learning. I understand how to do machine learning. Okay.
Yep.
I understand, and there were millions of businesses. Facebook had a product 15 years ago called something like Friends or something, and what they said to you with a straight face was, "Give us your customer list.
Yep.
We'll model it, and we'll go find you 10,000 of our Facebook people who exactly match that." Couldn't be a
audience generation.
And by the way, lead generation, the highest quality possible. These people absolutely match the people that already bought your stuff.
Yes. Look like a modeling.
And they would say it pays for itself. Exactly. So, that's machine learning. And there are still, we had a company called Knowledge Hound, and her proposition was that the companies actually didn't know what research they had inside their own organizations. They didn't know what they knew. And so they ended up paying consultants 2 and 3 times to do the same research.
Right.
And so she was building a system to manage all of their research, all the money that they previously paid for, in order to let them be smart about their experience. And basically, having said all that, when I look at AI, and we use 4 or 5 different models regularly, when I look at it, in a rule-based business, whether it's law, whether it's coding, whether it's any number of these other things, rule-based, not creative, rule-based.
Yep.
AI will win the game, and AI is already winning the game. And you have firms like JP Morgan saying they saved 300,000 hours of lawyer time in a year and basically, this was always a scam.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like this document, which I have used 100 times, I've fashioned particularly for you.
Yes.
I'm going to charge you a full boat for this same piece of paper. Well, all right, that's gone away.
Right.
So,
And now I run it through an LLM first, filling out a few questions. I ask my lawyer and say, hey, whatever. Yeah.
Totally. In fact, I gave a speech.
I don't send NDAs to lawyers anymore.
Yeah, I gave a speech 2 weeks ago, and one of the first things I did is I brought up my chatbot, and I asked it, what should I be talking to these people about? Give me 5, points, boom, like that, literally, with the content. And then what are the 5 challenges these people are facing? Boom, done.
To unpack it, Howard just referenced his chatbot. His chatbot is not ChatGPT. You have loaded it.
Yeah, into
years.
Yeah, right. So into ChatGPT, you can add whatever underlying data you want, and you can limit it to that as opposed to trying to boil the ocean.
Yep.
And this is the biggest problem with LLMs is very costly to try and boil the ocean and way more time consuming and everything else if you have a narrow scope and you can define it properly. So I'm seeing code being generated is working. I'm seeing legal stuff being generated. I'm seeing a lot of things in these areas. Creativity, so far, none in the purely what we think of as purely creative.
Sure.
Right? And this is
writing a song from scratch.
Yeah. This is a messy question because you can write a bad song from scratch.
Yeah.
Okay. But in terms of visual, for example, images now, it's over. We're at about 80% of a human being cannot differentiate between a visual image and a real image. 80% at 10% of the cost.
Yep.
Okay. So as soon as that continues to close, if you can't tell the difference, guess what? There is no difference.
Right. I mean, right now, if I'm writing a presentation, I remember just going through clip art and trying to find stuff. Now I just go to an LLM and say, I want something that looks like this and that, and this is my, my color scheme of this presentation.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Howard, let me ask you a question on that. You've been a champion of artists forever.
Yeah.
So what do you say to the illustrators out there that are now asking, what do I do?
Right.
Yeah. Well, look, illustrators, educators, editors, all of these people that invested 10, 20, 30 years in career learning, those careers are over. They're over.
So what are they?
And well, they find a new livelihood, and it's beyond depressing because it's not simply any given industry. It's the world is in a position where we're laying off or firing the federal government, obviously hundreds of thousands of people.
Sure.
But across the board, if you're 50 or 55, you have no new job hiring prospects. Zero. Okay? I mean, Indeed will not tell you that.
No.
But we've seen the interior stats, and companies just, they're not supposed to be ageist and they're not supposed to be discriminatory.
Right.
But the truth is the idea of hiring somebody horizontally is largely over now. It's amazing. It's largely over. And we don't see it in the law firms. We don't see it in any of these places that used to do that. Now, having said all that, and thinking that you can just hire these young people, the other downside of AI is it is eliminating scut work. And the scut work, this better than anybody. The scut work was where we made our bones. It's where you learn the culture. It's where you learn to be paying attention to details and all this stuff. That's all gone. And so kids come out of college, they can't read or write. I mean, to be clear, companies whine to me every week about having to do remedial training. Okay?
Absolutely.
But putting that aside, they come out and they think they're going right into management.
Yes.
And how you build a culture or how you build a work ethic in a business, and now add to that 50% or more are remote.
Right.
I don't know. This is why
their abilities aside for the employers. You wrote an article about we need to help Gen Z, I think was the title. And you're saying this goes beyond business, but into livelihood, and, struck a chord with me on what do the kids develop? I've got a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
So maybe unpack that article a little bit.
Well, I think that grew out of the feeling that today's kids, and I say anybody under 25 or 30 is in this category, they don't have traditions. They don't have the stuff. In business, they don't have the war stories because they're not interested in them.
Right.
But in their lives, they don't have rituals. They don't have traditions. Religion is screwed for this reason. All of these sort of institutional things are screwed. But those were the things, I said in the article, I don't think anybody has real friends on Facebook.
Right.
I don't think kids go outside anymore. I mean, there's
crazy, though.
Their parents are, hyper protective so they don't, expose themselves to, and there's a bunch of writing on what the phone is doing and what technology,
psychological impact to the development of.
But I mean, I think still that I said that between the lack of experiences, the lack of tradition and ritual, they don't have any grounding. So when you do a Gen Z survey, they don't trust anything. They don't trust educators. They don't trust lawyers. They don't trust judges. They don't trust politicians. Right. They don't trust government. They don't even trust doctors or medicine.
They kind of trust their friends.
Well, they talk to their peers, but trust is not something that
it's as close as they have.
It's a replica.
Well, it's why influencers are becoming the most important way to promote a product.
Yeah, that's true. Authentic. Yeah, authentic.
They're influenced by their friends. Trust. Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, look, their friends are apt to be talking to them about a factoid.
Yep,
a factoid.
Right.
We don't know. Nobody knows. Right. This is the biggest risk with Trump is like whoever whispered in his ear the last 2 minutes. That's what comes out of his mouth. And so this question about trust is just really frightening right now.
So if you think about if you're a leader in a company and you advise a lot of them, what are you telling them in this environment? You've got AI, you've got exchange of culture. Like what as a leader, how do you build the company? How do you build a culture?
Well, I think I've given up on the thought that you can build a new culture from scratch these days.
Interesting.
Okay. Except you can build a culture in team sports.
Okay.
Because necessarily they're together. You have defined goals. You have people who are absolutely dependent on each other.
They struggle together.
They struggle. Yeah, totally. Golf, it might be a different thing. Although the live example in golf is very interesting. I mean, it's failing, but I mean, it was a tremendous, blow to the ethics of golf.
Yeah.
To have a bunch of guys say, "I'm taking the money. I don't really care about you guys. We grew up together. We traveled and suffered for 20 years. Screw that.
Yeah, I'm done.
Take the money. I'm
good. Yeah.
But so I'm not optimistic about startups because of the issue of platforms, as we talked about before. The issue of clutter, which is getting your message out, is virtually impossible,
right,
and ridiculously costly. The technology is, becoming so costly in some respects that, again, I think only the big guys can do this. I mean, it never was the case before. But, there are going to be some opportunities. But what I tell, the companies that I deal with, I mean, I'll give you an example. So, and this is out of school slightly, but ConAgra is somebody I talked to with guys, big, huge company, makes 1,000 different snack kinds of things.
Yeah.
I went to meet with the management. This is we're coming midstream COVID. And we're getting ready to come out of COVID. And, and meet with the management team. And they want to know, should they let people bring their dogs back to work?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I've had this employee.
Yeah. And I'm like, let me explain to you that 75% of your people work in factories.
Right. Yeah.
Has it dawned on you that you're living in this white collar bubble where you're worried about the dogs, and these people have been working, day in and day out at the factory and risking their lives?
Yeah.
Have you thought about them? Not really.
Yeah.
So these issues of what is leadership doing?
Yeah.
And by the way, white collar workers suffered COVID for a year, give or take, as an inconvenience. And maybe a little bit more than that. And then their lives went back to, semblances of norm and, in fact, better in some respects. I mean, Microsoft and a couple of other consulting firms have stats saying we were just as productive at home.
Now, you hear Jamie Dimon every day saying we're not productive.
I know.
But he also forgets to mention how much debt he holds on real estate. So,
but Jamie Dimon reminds me of when I was a young lawyer, guys would leave their sport coat over the back of their, so you go home.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Looks like I'm here.
It looks like this was from How to Succeed in Business. As the empty coffee cups and the adding machine tapes and stuff. I think that one thing you have to tell all these guys is if you're going to demand or insist that your people come back to work, you better have something substantive for them to do that requires their presence.
Yeah.
Because if they're sitting in front of a computer doing a Zoom call, you lost that battle.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we work with probably 20 different companies trying to explain to them that you cannot say any 3 days because the people come in and the people they need are not there. It's not, so I think we're going to see a 4-day work week very soon.
Like national
locked in,
interesting
in 4-day work week.
Not in office, truly work week.
Yeah. And
what's going to be the catalyst for that?
I think that people are just going to say, I'm willing to make somewhat of a commitment to presence and to work. But I've learned through COVID that there are parts of my life that are more important than work. The work balance thing got a really big jolt in the arm.
Absolutely.
You discovered that it was important to be home with your kids. You discovered that there was more to life than work. And it wasn't, and of all people, Jeff Bezos says this all the time. He doesn't believe in work balance. He thinks it's a circle. If you're happy at home, you're going to be happy at work. If you're happy at work, you're going to be happy at home.
Yeah.
It's not a scale.
Right.
And Howard, let me pause in there. You've written volumes of what's called the perspiration principles. You had a tagline, if you want your dreams to come true, don't sleep. Has your view on that shifted through all of this?
No, but that's why I say we're doomed.
Yeah, okay. So you still think the work, you're not necessarily saying the 4-day working sort of a good thing. You think
my point about that younger workforce was, I don't know what to say. In fact, when I gave this talk to this group of YPO CEOs just recently, they asked me what to tell their kids, just as you said before. I don't know. I don't know what careers to tell them. All I can say is, develop a work ethic somehow, some way with your kids, model and give your kids an example in your own behavior. And then I did give them a specific list, and this is really important, I think, for every CEO. I said to them, please do not tell them that you work. And then I had like A, B, C, and D. I work so we can live in this nice house. I work so I could buy you great cars and toys. I work so we can take great vacations. That's all shit. That's a lie. Okay. I mean, if you're lucky, you say to them, I work because it gives my life meaning and I enjoy what I'm doing and I'm passionate about it and I'm making a difference. Yeah. That's why I work, not to buy stuff. Because if you teach your kids the stuff lesson, you're setting them up to be a failure. Yeah. It's a frightening thing. So that's really good. I do think you need to teach your kids that work matters, or ethic, and an ethic,
And honestly, I've got 3 daughters, and we are constantly, ethic matters, effort matters.
I'm 2 daughters and 4 granddaughters.
Oh, there you go. But the thing is, it's not always about intelligence. It's not always about being the smartest. You can outwork people.
Well, the grit. I mean, the whole history of grit. And if you Google grit, that's 100%. The attitude and work ethic are more important than talent. Yep. And also, I tell a lot of people, please don't tell your kids to pursue their passion. Yeah, that's a joke too. I mean, find something that you want to be doing, and if you do it successfully and you do it well, the passion sort of comes with it. But this theory that I'm going to be an influencer. By the way, influencer is, as you said, the latest career. Yeah. Right before that, if you ask girls from 10 to 15, their career aspiration was to be a personal assistant to a star. Which was even a lower. Yeah. I mean, it was less than at least an influencer works. I mean, if you ask these influencers,
they say they hold a lot. Yeah, they influencers like it ain't what it looks like.
You're familiar with this just in this project. I mean, filling the pipeline is a challenge.
Yes,
it's hard work. Once I write this
behind the scenes, making it all happen. So
when I write this weekly column, I mean, the header says, write something worth writing about, but also worth reading.
Right.
And you feel that pressure. You want to make it valuable. Otherwise, it's not really worth doing. So.
Okay. So you're a leader of a company right now. You've got hiring into a workforce that isn't all that excited to be working with you. You've got issues with what your company might be worth.
Yeah.
You've got massive change in the technology and in the pieces of your company. So,
at CCC, we went to Iowa.
Okay.
Yeah. We went to hire people that were from a culture that got up at 6 a.m. to feed the cows. And that had a work ethic built in.
Yes.
Because it's not something you can teach. I told a whole other group of financial guys.
Maybe as a company, you can't teach.
Please don't think that you're going to convert people coming in.
Right.
Please don't think that. Okay. People are, inclined to grow in the direction they're bent.
Yep.
And so you want to find those people. You don't want to have to seduce anybody. You don't want to have to convert anybody. You want people that come in that are proud of their work. They're not embarrassed that they're working. They're proud that they're ambitious. There's nothing wrong with that, you know, and they believe in the cause, you know, and those are things that you just can't teach. I mean, you know, and they don't want to listen anyway. And
so how do you look for that in an employee when you're interviewing them?
Well, you know, CEOs are among the worst people to do the interviewing. So first, you hire an HR person because we want to talk. We want to sell. We want to sell. I mean, if you watched 100 interviews by any CEO in the world, they would have talked for 80%.
Right.
Right. It's like shut up and learn something about the person. Okay. Don't
just this thing here. Yeah.
So number one is CEO shouldn't do it. I think number two is you want to see in their experience that they've had both ups and downs. And then I think that, you know, the last trap is you cannot sort of hire people who are good people that you don't have a concrete place for and think, especially now, because everybody's going in the other direction. Everybody is shrinking. But, you know, I knew many guys over the years that believed in a bench, and a bench is a bad bet. It's a bad bet. You know, you have to hire the person to fill the need that you presently have, and the best person. And that's not necessarily the best person you interview. You may fall in love with somebody and not have a place for them. So I think it's tough, but I think that, you know, you also have to be willing, and this is really scary, you have to fire people fast. Because as you bring people in, they either get it and get with the program and become additive, or they're a drag. And what's worse about keeping these people who you don't fire is they drag down your best performance.
Always. I mean, there's just data proves it. And then people, people are slow to fire. And it's really not because they don't see you're doing a bad job. Right. It's because they just don't want the uncomfortable firing.
Which again is why the CEO shouldn't do it.
Right.
Because CEOs are notorious chickens. They want to please everybody.
So interesting. So how do you find CEOs for companies you're involved with that aren't chickens?
Well, I don't think we've replaced the CEO. I think we either sell the business, or we or some natural progression.
Okay.
Anyway, but I haven't done any CEO searches, and I sit on a lot of boards. And as on the boards, I feel like I'm the only guy who has 100% the entrepreneur's interest. In mind. Because I never have enough skin in the game to matter, but I am interested in the company's direction and growth and making the right kind of decisions. And, you know, we can talk about this. I mean, the world of dealing with strategic partners is a nightmare, and with dealing with VCs is a nightmare, but if anything, it's gotten worse in the last 5 or 10 years because of COVID and because their returns are in the toilet.
You know, the VC's return, how much they're going to return in the
toilet. And their focus is challenging these days because they are 3 to 5 year exit kind of guys.
Right.
And they're already in these things 5 years.
Right. So for those that don't know, venture funds typically invest, they look at a horizon to get their money out, sell a company 3 to 5 years, and COVID stalled a lot.
Yeah. I mean, the most interesting program we're doing right now is at Stanford, where we're dealing only with family offices. And we're dealing with family offices because they have the right perspective.
And for those family offices, basically the investment arm for very wealthy families.
Yeah. And because they are legacy investors. They're not looking for 3 years.
Right.
And I think that
the long-term family wealth.
Yeah. And I think that the challenges for the next 5-10 years for this country are, you know, maybe AI, but basically environment, climate, healthcare, medicine. These things. These are not short-term investments.
No.
And so at Stanford, you know, you're going to have about $1.5 trillion worth of wealth transferred to the next generation of Stanford alumni, to their kids. And we're trying to make a program to figure out how to advise them and get Stanford in the middle of those transactions to help them secure these, you know, 10 and 20 year investment programs, which makes sense for those businesses, but clearly is not a venture business anymore.
No.
And by the way, you know, a lot of the businesses that have succeeded, a lot of our businesses have gone from being growth companies to being really solid companies.
Yep.
That's not of interest to the venture capital.
You know, Good.
Well, there was a pattern that you told us about before this where you're seeing certain founders or a group that are sort of they're at the decade plus mark. Maybe they're not growth anymore, but there's some profit. But the old investors could get out, but the new investors haven't gotten the return yet.
Totally.
Why is that happening? What does that founder do?
Well, I think that the founder has to find a company that's willing to let the VC investors roll into the new deal, and let the executives and the early people exit.
Yeah.
And that's a complicated deal because that's management saying, we don't want to go forward. Which nobody wants to hear, unless you're a giant, arrogant company that's doing M&A and doesn't really care because you didn't intend to keep those folks for the long term anyway. Okay, so in that kind of a deal, you can set it up so that the investors who want to roll because they need to have a longer horizon for
staying with the next
investment, they can stay and the people can exit who want to exit. That's about the only way to do it.
So does the founder hire a banker? Do they go out do it themselves?
No, they can't do it themselves. They have to hire a banker because you have to have somebody who could talk to the strategic investors and the venture guys, who is not, sounding like you're giving up the ghost. You want to, you're not going to do everything. I mean, a lot of these founders, after all these years, they're tired, but they're mostly tired of having these VCs yell in their ears.
Right.
Like, go to the stars. I said before, the other post-COVID experience was the VCs saying, pedal to the metal, let's go for it. And the entrepreneur saying, you don't understand it. We just dodged an enormous business, risk. And I had to fire a lot of people and I don't want to go there again. I'm not going to hire 20 people. I'm not going to, spend millions of dollars. I want to build the business, but it's a good, solid business now. And I don't want to bet the business because you want to have levels of growth that don't make any sense.
So there was this growth at any cost mentality for a long time.
Yeah.
It seems to have gone by the wayside.
Well, except in AI, which is
fair.
In AI, they're throwing
kind of the one more, and it's totally crazy money. Yeah. But then you made what I thought was an interesting point. A lot of companies have become really good companies, but they're just not big venture exits anymore. Like, what's the new model? How do you build?
Well, what the model should be, the PE model.
Private equity model.
Yeah, private equity model, without thinking that every business has to be $1 trillion transaction. Yep. So I think we'll see some smaller PE kind of
realignments. Yeah.
And the one risk, though, is what I call, 2 warm cups of coffee don't make a hot drink. I mean, you're going to see a lot of desperation M&A.
Yes.
And that doesn't help anybody. It's like kissing your sister. We'll make it up in value.
Yeah.
Never happened.
We'll take out a lot of overhead costs, and therefore the cost model will be better for both parties.
So I think we have to avoid that. But I do think that you could look around and find a lot of companies in the, let's say, the 250 to 500 million range that could grow to be twice that size, could be very lucrative and profitable for an investor. But that aren't going to be telling a story that they're going to grow to the moon anytime soon again.
Yeah. With this is the atmosphere, and I think it's going over time here, for the companies. Going back to Gen Z, the new kids on the block. If you're a 22-year-old coming out of college, what does Howard Tullman view from the bird's eye that might be the best, fields to go into, or at least a place that you're not just going to get swamped?
Well, first of all, I have been an advocate. One of the schools that I built, 2 of the schools actually, were vocational colleges. And make no mistake that my car mechanic knows more about my body, my car than my doctor does about my body.
Yeah.
And makes probably $125,000 a year, has a middle class life, has a good living with no angst. Okay. You go home at the end of the day. So there are a lot of careers. I mean, I think that we have shunned and stigmatized and stuff that can't be exported. Okay.
Yep.
There'll be robots, but you can't export the plumber,
Yeah.
And so the trades, I think, are going to have a resurgence.
Yes.
That's one. 2, we're going to see colleges that don't bankrupt you for the rest of your life. So we're going to see 2-year vocational colleges and colleges that are focused on getting you a job, as opposed to a 4-year school where you and your parents go into debt for 10 or 20 years. So I think that the vocations are one, the trades are one area that is safe and strong and is worth looking at. Within these other industries, I think the only thing I can say is, and I said this a long time ago, be a role player for a while rather than roll your own. And what that means is there's going to be this tantalizing gig economy fantasy. I'm going to open the 400th Insomnia cookie franchise, and my parents are going to give me the money out of their 401k or their 101k.
Yeah, right.
Or I'm going to be whatever, and you don't learn anything working for yourself. You really don't. Don't learn anything that's substantively valuable when you look for your next job or your next career. So I think that working for some of these big companies, whatever you say about them, I mean, it's not a place to spend your life because the companies don't represent a lifetime, opportunity anymore.
Yep.
But it's a good place to learn some discipline and some structure and some basic skills, which you just don't learn in the startup. I don't know what else to say about that. So I think, I would tell a kid coming out of school to see what the job market was, what they were interested in, and, then become a go-to person, become a person that the company wants to keep, that the other people rely on. Not the last gasp, but the first person that you go into. And you develop that kind of a persona, you won't ever lack for work or job opportunities.
So I don't know what you said, Howard, but we got a lot of thunder all of a sudden as we've been recording this. So I don't know what you're feeling with the wrath of something's out.
Wizard effect.
Well, I think with that, thank you. We can go on forever. So we'll just thank you for your time and hope to have you back again.
Happy to be here.
Thanks, Howard.
Thanks.